Picture an object sitting on a velvet cushion. It's about the length of your forearm. It's spiral. It's the colour of old ivory, somewhere between yellow and grey, and it tapers to a point so fine you could draw blood with it. The tag on the cushion says, "Unicorn horn. Genuine. Authenticated. Purchased in Amsterdam for £42. Now." Here's the thing. It's not a unicorn horn. It's a narwhal tooth. A long twisted tooth from a whale that lives in the Arctic Ocean. A whale you've never heard of because nobody's written a popular book about them yet. The narwhal is a real animal. It has one very long spiralling tooth that projects from its upper jaw like a lance, and it lives in cold water, and it is about as unmagical as any animal on Earth. It is in fact a whale with a very unusual dental situation. The man who sold it to the collector knew exactly what it was. The collector who spent £42 on it, a sum that could have kept a working family fed for a year and a half, almost certainly suspected. But here's the part that will keep you awake, or put you to sleep depending on how your brain works. It didn't matter. Not entirely. Because the year is 1693, because museums don't exist yet. Not really. Not as public institutions open to anyone with an hour free and comfortable shoes. Because the only way an ordinary person, or even an extraordinary person, can see the wonders of the world is to find someone who's collected them. And the people who've collected them have been lied to, cheated, swindled and dazzled in equal measure. And they've paid fortunes for things that might be real and things that definitely aren't, and they've put them all together in a single room and called that room a cabinet of curiosities, and told themselves, honestly, genuinely, that the room contains the secrets of the universe. And honestly, they weren't entirely wrong. Picture a room with 12-foot ceilings. Fill every wall, floor to ceiling, with shelves. Fill the shelves with glass jars and leather boxes and wooden cases and things that have no container at all and simply sit there, being what they are. Add a crocodile hanging from the ceiling, stuffed, lacquered, mouth open, 7 feet long, swinging faintly in the draught from the door. Add a human skeleton wired to an iron pole in the corner. Add a globe with extra continents painted on it. Add the jawbone of something that ate the crocodile before it was stuffed. That's the room. That's where you work. This is the story of those rooms, those collectors, the men who chased the world into a box and paid for it with everything they had. We're going to live inside one of those rooms tonight. Not as a museum visitor walking past glass cases with a little placard telling you what to look at. As a cataloguer. A young man with ink-stained fingers and a leather ledger who has been hired to write down every single thing in a collection that might be the most extraordinary room in England. I make these history stories, and I'll be honest with you, this one got away from me a little. I started looking into cabinets of curiosities because I thought it would be a nice, gentle story about some rich eccentrics with too much money and not enough friends. And then I found out about the body parts, the living animals kept in boxes, the human remains from 4 continents, owned by men who had never once considered whether the people those remains belonged to might have had opinions about that. And I thought, well, that's a story. So, get comfortable. Pull whatever blanket you have a little tighter, because we're going somewhere tonight that is equal parts beautiful and deeply, deeply strange. Here we go. Your eyes open to grey light. Not darkness for once. Grey. The particular grey of a London morning when the coal smoke from 10,000 chimneys has mixed itself into the sky and turned the whole city the colour of an old pewter spoon. A flat, diffused light that comes from no particular direction. Light from everywhere and nowhere. Light that doesn't cast shadows. You're not at home. Home is a room above a chandler's shop in Aldgate. A room you share with a journeyman printer who snores like a Dian cart horse and who has somehow accumulated 14 individual dirty stockings on the floor around his bed despite owning only 3 pairs. Home smells like tallow candles and the faint chemical sharpness of printer's ink coming up through the floorboards. This is not that smell. This smell is something else entirely. You take a moment, lying on the narrow cot in the servants' hallway, just cataloguing it. It's your job now, cataloguing things. You might as well start here, at the beginning of the day, with the first sense that greets you. There's something sweet underneath everything else, but wrong sweet, like fruit that's gone past ripe into something fermented, into something that's been arrested in its rotting rather than allowed to complete the process. It's the sweetness of interruption, of things stopped in the middle of becoming something else. There's something dry and dusty over that, like old paper left too long in the sun, like the inside of a book that hasn't been opened in 20 years. There's something sharp. Spirits of wine, definitely, the kind used for preservation, with an edge that catches at the very back of your throat, that makes you want to cough, and then doesn't quite make you cough, holding you in that almost cough state for a second. And under all of it, something that you don't have a word for yet, something that smells like the inside of the world. You've been working for Sir Edmund Blackwell for 11 days. 11 days, and you're still not sure you fully understand what you've taken on. Your name is Thomas Crane. You're 20 years old. You're from a village outside Norwich called Winburg, which is a small, flat, very quiet place of perhaps 300 souls, most of them involved in some aspect of the wool trade, none of them in possession of a crocodile. You arrived in London 6 months ago with a letter of introduction from your schoolmaster, a man named Forsyth, who had once had a correspondence with a fellow at the Royal Society, who had mentioned in passing that a certain collector in Lime Street was looking for a literate young man with a head for detail and no tendency toward fainting. That last qualification. That's the one you keep coming back to, lying on your cot in the grey morning, listening to the city begin its day outside. Sir Edmund Blackwell's house on Lime Street is not remarkable from the outside. 3 stories, brick. A door painted the dark green of Thames water at low tide. Respectable but not ostentatious, which matters in 1693, in this city, in this street, where the neighbours include 3 successful merchants, a retired sea captain with opinions about everything, and at least one man whose source of income nobody discusses at dinner. It's the inside that stops you dead. You experienced it for the first time 11 days ago, when Sir Edmund's manservant, a compact Welshman named Probert, with the expression of a man who has long since run out of capacity for surprise, and filed the last of his astonishment away somewhere it can no longer cause trouble, led you through the entrance hall and opened the door to the room on the ground floor that Sir Edmund calls his study. Nobody should call that room a study. A study implies something orderly, something organised around thinking rather than around accumulation. Papers on a desk, books on shelves, a man with a pen and a clear mind working through ideas in sequence. This is not that. This is a cathedral built to contain the impossible. The ceilings are 12 feet high, and every inch of every wall is covered. Shelves, floor to ceiling, crammed with objects the way a mouth is crammed with teeth. No gaps, everything touching everything, every available inch occupied. Glass-fronted cabinets displaying smaller specimens behind their panes, the glass slightly warped with age so that the objects behind it are faintly distorted, faintly dreaming. Hooks from the ceiling from which hang larger things. The crocodile, 7 feet long, stuffed with sawdust and lacquered until its scales shine like wet leather, its mouth open in a permanent silent scream that reveals more teeth than you knew crocodiles had. The jawbone of something larger than the crocodile attached to the ceiling by 2 iron brackets, its curve wide enough to stand inside. 2 enormous shells, each the size of a cartwheel, their interiors fading from white at the outer edge to deep rose pink at the centre. A human skeleton, standing upright in the corner, wired to an iron pole, wearing a hat. The hat. You don't know whose decision that was. The skeleton is wearing a broad-brimmed hat that might once have been fashionable, tilted forward over its empty eye sockets at an angle that could be described as rakish if you were being generous, or deeply unsettling if you were being accurate. Between the shelves and the cases, the walls themselves are hung with paintings, not portraits or landscapes, but images of things, dissections, anatomical charts, precise botanical illustrations, a chart of the night sky made by someone with exquisite control of their pen. Maps, large maps, some of them older than the house itself, their paper foxed with age, showing coastlines that are sometimes approximately right and sometimes entirely invented. Pressed botanical specimens under glass, the plants reduced to their essential 2-dimensional selves, colour mostly gone, form preserved. Antlers from animals you cannot identify, too large for deer, not shaped right for elk, from somewhere else entirely. A tapestry depicting a naval battle at sea in muted colours, and in one corner, framed, a piece of parchment covered in characters that might be Arabic or might be something older and less identifiable. The floor is not empty either. Chests, a dozen at least, leather and brass hinged, stacked against the walls wherever the shelves don't reach. A large wooden crate in the far corner, still partially sealed with pitch, that arrived from Batavia 3 weeks ago, and which Sir Edmund has not yet had the courage to open, or perhaps not yet had the right companion to open it with. A globe on a brass stand in the centre of the room, with extra land masses painted onto its surface in a sea to the west that probably don't exist. Various objects simply placed on the floor because there is nowhere else to put them. A stone column capital, Roman you'd guess, its acanthus leaves worn smooth. A wooden chest with an elaborate lock and no visible key. 3 ceramic jars the height of your waist, sealed with wax, origin unknown, and the smell. The same smell from the hallway, but stronger here, concentrated. The sum of everything in the room giving off its particular contribution. Wood, and dust, and spirits of wine, and something animal, and something mineral, and underneath everything, the faint metallic sweetness of things kept too long in enclosed spaces. The smell of everywhere the objects had been before they arrived here. Every ship that brought something. Every jungle and mountain and ocean floor that gave up something strange. All of it compressed into one room on Lime Street, London, and sealed behind a painted green door. Your job is to write it all down. All of it. Every single object in this room, and there are many hundreds of them, arranged in Sir Edmund's system of organisation, which turns out to be several incompatible systems of organisation layered on top of each other over 40 years, needs to be described, measured, weighed where possible, and assigned a place in the catalogue. The current catalogue exists in 7 different notebooks with 7 different systems of organisation, none of them compatible with each other. 3 of the notebooks appear to have been written by people who are no longer alive. One of them is partially in Latin. One of them is organised alphabetically by the first letter of the object's description in a language you don't recognise, and neither does Sir Edmund, who acquired it with the collection of a Dutch merchant who died in 1671. You have a new leather ledger, good quality, 200 pages, purchased by Sir Edmund from a stationer on Cheapside. Your quill and ink are your own, acquired from the same stationer for 6pence. Write everything, Sir Edmund told you on your first morning, spreading his hands in a gesture that took in the entire room, the whole impossible abundance of it. Describe each object as though you are describing it to someone who has never left their house, as though they are blind to the world. Everything, you said. Everything. The mundane and the magnificent and the fraudulent alike. Note what you know to be false. Note what you suspect but cannot prove. Note what you cannot explain at all. He picked up a small glass jar from the nearest shelf and held it up to the light from the window. Inside, preserved in yellowish spirits that had gone slightly amber with age, was something small and fetal and ambiguous. It had too many fingers. Note, he said, setting it back on the shelf with the careful habit of a man who handles fragile things constantly, especially what you cannot explain. The morning routine starts before Sir Edmund is awake. Probert unlocks the study at 7 o'clock in all weathers. You come in, pulling on your coat in the cold of the hallway, your breath visible, and you light the candles in the standing holders because the windows are half blocked by the shelves, and the natural light, even on a clear morning, is never sufficient for close work. The long candles in their iron stands cast a warm orange light that is both better and worse than daylight. Better because it's consistent, worse because it plays tricks with colour and throws deep shadows under things that in real light are simply themselves. You open your ledger to where you left off yesterday. Page 43. Halfway through the northwest corner of the room, the section Sir Edmund calls terrestrial curiosities, organic, which means things that were once alive and grew from the ground or walked on it. The shelf you're working on this morning is at chest height, which is the good height. You don't have to kneel on the cold flagstone floor or stand on the step-ladder, a device of extraordinary instability that wobbles in a different direction each time you get on it, as though it's actively trying to prevent you from reaching the upper shelves. The first object of the day. A wooden box about the size of a Bible, lacquered black with age and handling until the surface is smooth as glass. Small brass catch, the kind that tends to stick in cold weather. You work it open with your thumbnail. Inside, nested in wool batting that has yellowed with age, and taken on the faint smell of everything else in the room, are 4 stones. Not decorative stones, not gemstones cut and polished for rings, not the geological specimens with their dramatic crystals that Sir Edmund keeps in the glass cabinet by the door. Just stones, roughly the size of your closed fist, each one marked on the bottom with a small painted number in faded red. There's a note folded under the batting in Sir Edmund's handwriting, which you've learned to read fairly quickly despite his tendency to substitute Latin abbreviations for common words. The note says, translated into plain English, 4 stones removed from the stomach of a cow that died near Devizes in Wiltshire in 1679. Found during butchery. Origin unknown. Significance unclear. You spend some time with the stones. You hold each one. They are cold. Cold the way only stones are cold, with a deep, persistent cold that comes from the earth rather than just from the air, and smooth in a way that things get when they've been handled repeatedly. The smoothness of attention, of being passed from hand to hand, examined and set down and picked up again. 2 of them are limestone, visibly so, the pale grey of English chalk country. 1 is flint. You grew up near Flint country, you know flint. That particular blue-grey darkness, the slight translucency at the edges. The 4th is something else. You hold the 4th stone under the candle. Darker than the others. Denser. It sits in your palm with a weight that feels disproportionate to its size. A heaviness that makes you adjust your hand slightly. And when the candlelight hits it at the right angle, there is something in it that shouldn't be there. A sheen. An iridescence. Very faint, barely there. The way you can only see certain stars by looking slightly to one side of them rather than directly at them. A suggestion of blue-green in the depths of the dark grey surface. You hold it steady and tilt it. The colour moves. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would make you drop it. Just a subtle shift in what's happening inside the stone. The way a soap bubble holds its colours not at the surface but somehow behind it. You write, Item 247. 4 stones, varying composition, extracted from the stomach of a cow, Devizes, Wiltshire, 1679. 3 specimens appear to be common limestone and flint, geological origin consistent with the Wiltshire chalk. 4th specimen, unusual, dense, heavier than its size suggests, dark grey-black coloration, slight metallic quality, faint iridescence visible under direct candlelight, shifting with angle of light, suggesting possible metallite mineral content or internal laminar structure. Approximately 3 inches in diameter, 2.5 inches deep. Weight, significantly heavier than volume would suggest for limestone or flint. You pause. You look at that last line and then write beneath it. Note. This stone was inside a living animal. It arrived inside that animal somehow. It may have been swallowed, or it may have formed there, bezoar-like, over time. Either answer is strange. Origin of iridescence unexplained. The cowstones go back into their box. The box goes back on the shelf. You move on. The next item is a glass jar, sealed with wax, brownish around the seal from whatever was dripped there and dried. Spirits inside, yellowish, the amber shade of old preservation fluid. The spirits of wine that stopped something from continuing to become what it was becoming. You take a slow breath before looking too closely at the contents. You've learned this. Prober taught you on your 2nd day, without particular gentleness. Breathe in before you open your eyes fully, not after. Inside the jar, curled in the amber fluid, a hand. Not a human hand. Small, smaller than yours, with proportions subtly different from a human hand. A primate hand, clearly, from an animal that used those fingers the way you use yours. To grip, to feel, to investigate, to eat. The skin is desiccated and very dark, preserved past its natural colour into something approaching black. The fingers are slightly curled inward, a position suggesting the hand was preserved in a natural resting state rather than arranged. The thumb is opposable. The nails are still present, curved and flattened. The jar is labelled in a handwriting that predates Sir Edmund's ownership by decades. Chiroptera. Simia? Unknown. Siam? 1651. Siam. What you'd call Thailand today. The year 1651. The year your father was born. This hand was preserved in some port town in Southeast Asia, while your grandfather was probably pulling pints somewhere in Norfolk. You look at it for a long moment. You write, Item 248. glass jar, sealed wax, good condition, no leakage. Preserved primate hand, small species, identification uncertain. Dark preserved spirits, amber colour from age. Label reads, Chiroptera, Simia, unknown. Siam, 1651. The label reflects genuine uncertainty on the part of the original cataloguer about the animal class. Chiroptera are bats, but the hand anatomy is clearly not chiropteran. Simia is correct. This is a simian hand, primate, almost certainly from a small ape species. Proportionally, and given the size, approximately 6 inches from wrist to fingertip. I believe this to be a juvenile gibbon, possibly halibates, consistent with species described by Bontius in Siam and the Malay Peninsula. Recommend reclassification. Class: Simia confirmed, family uncertain, species unknown. Expert consultation advised. Expert consultation. You write those 2 words and then look at them, as if there's a man somewhere in London to whom you can simply take a jar containing a preserved primate hand and who will nod and say, "Ah yes, I know exactly what this is." Actually, there might be. You've heard the name Sloane mentioned in Sir Edmund's letters. A young physician, a fellow of the Royal Society. He was in Jamaica for a while, studying the natural history of the island. He collects, but that's for later. You move on. By 9 in the morning, you've catalogued 11 objects. You've written about a polished stone ball that seems to hum faintly when you hold it in a closed fist, though that's almost certainly the vibration of the cart traffic in the street outside coming up through the flagstones and into the object, which is dense enough to act as a kind of resonator. You've written about a fragment of cloth that Sir Edmund believes came from the robe of a Chinese emperor, though the note with it says only purchased Rotterdam 1664, origin disputed. You've written about a piece of wood so dark and dense it might be iron, with a grain that runs in perfectly straight parallel lines, unlike any English tree. You've written about 4 teeth, not extracted from anything you can see in the room, just 4 teeth in a small wooden box, human-sized but wrong-shaped, the roots curling in directions teeth don't curve. You've written about a map drawn on skin. That's when Sir Edmund appears. He's not what you expected a collector to look like. You expected something grandly eccentric. A wild-haired, wild-eyed man in exotic robes, some physical embodiment of a room that contains multitudes. A man whose appearance announced, even from a distance, that he collected impossible things. Sir Edmund Blackwell is 63 years old, about 5 feet 8 inches, and looks like a prosperous grain merchant who has recently received news that is not quite as bad as feared. He has a round face with a quality of settled attentiveness about it, alert eyes the colour of weak tea that are clearly in the habit of looking at things carefully, and hands that are permanently ink-stained despite apparently constant washing, the ink having found its way into the fine lines of his knuckles and the callus on his writing finger and decided to stay. He wears the same dark wool coat every morning, a coat that has done years of service and shows it, with a white cravat that is slightly yellow at the edges from decades of proximity to a face. He looks, in short, like someone's respectable uncle. The kind of uncle you visit on Sundays and who gives you a coin and tells you an unexciting anecdote about commerce until he starts talking. "You've got to item 247, he says this morning, appearing in the doorway with a cup of coffee. Real coffee, the expensive kind, purchased from a merchant he uses specifically for the quality, the smell of it cutting cleanly through the study's ambient strangeness, and looking at your open ledger from a polite distance. 248, you say? The hand? Ah. He comes fully into the room, settles into the chair at his own desk. His desk is positioned so that from his seat he can see the entire room. You've noticed this. The arrangement is deliberate. He doesn't sit with his back to his collection. The hand, what do you make of it? Primate. Small species. I think juvenile gibbon, the proportions are right. I'd want someone with actual specimens to confirm, but I've read Bontius and the size is consistent with what he describes from Siam. He nods slowly, both hands around the coffee cup. He has a habit of warming his hands on whatever cup or vessel he's holding, regardless of the actual temperature in the room. He does it even on warm days. That's almost exactly what a fellow at Gresham College said in 1688, he says. Thought Gibbon as well. Smaller than the specimens he had seen from Borneo, but he attributed that to the juvenile thing. A pause. He borrowed the jar for a week, brought it back with a note that said, "Conclusive identification impossible without living comparison." Helpful. Sir Edmund makes the sound that serves him as a laugh. A short exhalation through the nose, not quite a smile. Natural philosophy in the 1680s. Mostly a great deal of very well-educated men admitting they don't know things, but doing so in Latin. This is the thing about Sir Edmund. 11 days in, and you're beginning to understand that underneath the slightly rumpled exterior is a man who has spent 40 years thinking harder about the world than almost anyone else in it. Not performing intelligence. That kind of collector exists too, and you've seen them referenced in the notes and correspondence that Sir Edmund lets you read. Men who collect because it signals a certain kind of taste to visitors, the way they acquire furniture or paintings. Men for whom the objects are props. Sir Edmund is not that. He collects because he genuinely believes, with the conviction of long experience, that the world is more strange and various than anyone has yet admitted, and he has dedicated his life and a significant portion of his fortune to documenting that strangeness. The 42-pound narwhal tooth is on the shelf just behind his desk. You haven't catalogued it yet. Working your way around the room systematically, northwest corner before you reach the central and south shelves, but you've looked at it. Several times, you've held it, running your thumb along the spiral, feeling the twist of it that's identical to a helix in mathematics or a vine climbing a pole. The tag says, "Unicorn horn." You've read enough by now to know what a narwhal is. You've seen the sketches in the natural philosophy books Sir Edmund lets you borrow from his library in the evenings. A condition of employment you negotiated in addition to your wage, because books are what you came to London for. More than money. More than anything. You know it's not a unicorn horn. You haven't said anything yet. Sir Edmund puts down his coffee cup and picks up a small sealed box from his desk. One you haven't seen before. Arrived this morning with Probert's early errand run. He sets it in front of you. New arrival, he says. Probert collected it from the docks yesterday while you were cataloguing. I want your eyes on it before I open it. What is it? He unfolds a water-stained letter from beside the box. The paper rippled and spotted from what might have been seawater, or might have been rain, or might simply have been the accumulated moisture of 3 weeks at sea. According to this letter from Captain Holt of the merchant vessel Endurance, he reads, a most extraordinary specimen of unknown provenance, acquired in the trading port of Nagasaki, in the company of a Dutch merchant who vouched for its authenticity, being nothing less than the preserved body of a creature part fish and part human, known to the Japanese as Ningyo, and to the Dutch as Zeemermin. He folds the letter. You look at the box. Wooden, roughly 18 inches long by 8 inches wide, sealed with a thick tar ridge along the lid's edge. The wood is dark with age and handling. From where you're sitting, you can already, Now that you know what to look for, smell it over the room's general odour. Something concentrated. Animal. The smell of preservation carried out more recently than most of what's in this room. Mermaid, you say? So Captain Holt claims. Sir Edmund's expression is entirely neutral, neither credulous nor dismissive, the expression of a man withholding judgment until he has evidence. Open it. The tar seal is old and dry but thick. It comes away in flakes when you work your penknife around the edge, each flake crumbling slightly between your fingers, leaving a black gritty residue in the lines of your knuckles. The smell that escapes as the seal breaks is immediate and decisive. Spirits of wine heavily concentrated, the sharpness of it reaching up your nose and registering at the back of your throat as a mild burn. Something underneath that, animal, organic, meat, arrested on its way to becoming something else. The smell of preservation itself, of something that should have kept changing but was stopped. You've learned to breathe through your mouth when opening new sealed containers. Probert taught you that grimly on your second day, after you'd made the mistake with the jar from the East Indies that turned out to contain a crab that had been preserved somewhat more casually than the others. You breathe through your mouth, the lid comes free. Inside, packed in dried moss and fine wood shavings, Excelsior, used to cushion fragile cargo, is the specimen. You look at it for a long moment. Then you pick up your quill. Item 249. Wooden box, tar-sealed. Contents. Composite specimen. Approximately 17 inches in total length. Upper portion. Desiccated primate. Small species. Possibly juvenile. Skull and upper torso intact. Arms folded at chest. Face. Teeth partially exposed in what appears to be rictus, though this may be artifact of desiccation rather than any expression in life. Lower portion. Fish body, beginning approximately at the waist of the primate portion. Tail fin intact. Scales dry but present and complete. Coloration. Deep brown throughout, uniform, consistent with desiccation process. Condition, very good. Extraordinarily well preserved. You stop writing. You lean closer to the seam. You hold your candle close. Fine black thread. In certain light it's nearly invisible. The thread the same dark colour as the desiccated tissue on either side. But in candlelight at the right angle, it's there. Small, careful stitches, regularly spaced, running in a continuous line around the circumference, where the primate torso meets the fish body. You sit back. This is craft. Someone did this deliberately, carefully, with considerable skill. Someone killed or found a small monkey and killed or found a fish, and stitched them together with the patient attention of a competent surgeon, and treated the whole thing with whatever preservation technique produced this uniform desiccation, and packaged it and sold it. You write, note, composite specimen, not a single organism, stitching visible at join, fine black thread, regularly spaced, extremely skilled work. Primate upper portion and fish lower portion have been joined artificially and treated together to achieve uniform desiccation and colour. This is fabrication, a skilled one. The preservation treatment is excellent, and the join has been made to be unobtrusive under casual examination, but it is not genuine. This is not a mermaid. You put the quill down. You look at Sir Edmund. He's looking at the specimen with an expression you haven't seen on his face before. Not dismay exactly, not surprise. Something more complicated. The expression of a man encountering something that confirms a suspicion, while still managing to be remarkable in its own right. You can see the stitching, he says. Yes, clearly in this light. I could see it too last night, after Probert brought it in. He's quiet for a moment. Captain Holt paid £12 for it in Nagasaki, and charged you 25. He says it flatly, without apparent rancour. I suspected as much from the letter, but I wanted to see if you'd catch it immediately, or whether I'd need to show you. He stands, walks to the specimen, looks down at it in its box. He picks it up carefully with both hands and turns it in the candlelight. There's a man in Japan, or more likely an industry, he says. Men who make these, they call them ningyo in Japan, which is a word from folklore, a creature of the sea in human form, not entirely unlike our own mermaid legends. But these things in the boxes that arrive in Dutch ships are not attempts at folklore. They're commercial products, made because men like me have been paying ship captains to bring back wonders. He turns the specimen once more. And the ship captains have learned that wonders are profitable, and exact accuracy is inconvenient. He sets it back in the box with the same care he'd give a genuine article. I'm going to keep it, he says. You don't respond immediately. I'm going to catalogue it honestly. You write what you wrote. Composite, fabricated, expert craftsmanship, but not genuine. And I'm going to keep it, because it is still something. It tells us what people in 1693 will pay to believe. It tells us what craftsmen in Nagasaki will make to serve that belief. It tells us about the trade routes that carry these things from there to here, and about the chain of hands they pass through and the price that rises at each link. He looks at you. A fraud honestly labelled is no longer a fraud. It's a lesson. The world contains both things, the wonders and the fakes, and pretending otherwise is its own kind of dishonesty. He goes back to his desk. You look at the mermaid in its box. You close the lid. You write in the margin, retaining collection with honest labelling. This object is evidence of the economy of wonder. Here's the thing about cabinets of curiosities, and when I say that, I need you to understand what the phrase actually contains, not cabinet, as in the furniture. In the 16th century, which is about 150 years before Thomas is standing in Lime Street, cabinet meant a room, a private room, a study. The Italian word was studiolo. The German was Wunderkammer, wonder room, or sometimes Kunstkammer, art room. The rooms of princes and dukes and merchant princes, filled with the strangest and most extraordinary things their money and connections and ships could bring. The impulse is older than that. People have always collected. Roman emperors had collections. Egyptian pharaohs were buried with the objects that mattered to them. But the Wunderkammer as a specific cultural form, the deliberate, systematic, comprehensive attempt to hold the entire world in one room, that emerges in the courts of the Holy Roman Empire in the 1550s and spreads from there to every corner of Europe within a generation. Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor who ruled from Prague until 1612, essentially losing his mind over the course of his reign, a process historians still argue about. Rudolph's collection filled an entire wing of Prague Castle, 3,000 paintings, automatons that moved and played music, astronomical instruments of extraordinary precision, magical books, clocks that tracked the motion of the planets, objects alleged to possess miraculous properties, relics, talismans, things wrapped in stories too good to fact-check. He also had a live lion and an orangutan. The lion ate several members of the court staff over the years. Rudolph was not troubled by this. Ferdinand II of Tyrol, Archduke and enthusiast built a special gallery at Ambras Castle near Innsbruck to house his collection, the Kunstkammer, and organised it into a system. He wanted the collection to represent the complete range of human art and nature's diversity. Everything that existed should have a representative specimen. The minerals, the animals, the plants, the products of human craft, the whole world miniaturized, the whole world possessed. That desire to contain, to organize, to comprehend is what drives collectors in 1693. It drives Sir Edmund buying a narwhal tooth for £42. It drove Rudolph II keeping a lion in his castle. It drove the anonymous craftsman in Nagasaki to sit down with a thread and a needle and a dead monkey and a dead fish and think, someone will pay for this. What those rooms contained was genuinely extraordinary. Rhinoceros horns, fragments of meteorites, the preserved skins of animals never seen alive in Europe, instruments that could measure things no previous generation had ever thought to measure, medical preparations, anatomical models in wax, the skulls of criminals, the bones of saints. All of it jumbled together, organised or not organised, real or fake or somewhere in between, all of it carrying the same message. The world is larger than you know. The world is stranger than you've been told. Come and see. By 1693, when Thomas is here, in this room, with his ledger and his candle, things are beginning to change. The Ashmolean Museum at Oxford opened in 1683, the first building in England designed specifically as a public museum, where anyone could come and look at the collection donated by Elias Ashmole. Not just men of means, not just fellows of the Royal Society, anyone, for free. That's new. That's very new. The future is already here in embryo, the future in which the objects escape their private rooms and become public, in which the whole project of the Wunderkammer, understanding the world through its objects, becomes an institution rather than an eccentricity. But not yet. Not here, in 1693, in Lime Street. Here, it's still private, still one man's room, still £42 for a narwhal tooth with the wrong label, still a room that smells like the inside of the world. Around 10 in the morning, Sir Edmund announces that someone is coming to visit. Dr. James Ashton, he says, pulling on a coat that's marginally better than his morning one, slightly less frayed at the cuffs, the buttons actually brass rather than pewter, natural philosopher, fellow of the Royal Society. He's been wanting to see the Batavian crate since I mentioned it in a letter last month. The Batavian crate, the large wooden box still tar-sealed in the far corner. It arrived from a contact of Sir Edmund's in Batavia, the Dutch East Indies trading hub, the city Europeans built on the island of Java, 3 weeks ago. You've been eyeing it since your first day. Sir Edmund's been eyeing it longer. Neither of you has opened it. What's in it, you ask? Sir Edmund gives you a look that contains both genuine mystery and, you think, a certain amount of authentic uncertainty. The look of a man who knows what's claimed but has learned to hold claims at arm's length until they demonstrate their accuracy in person. According to my contact in Batavia, the complete skeleton and associated dried specimens of an animal the local Malay traders call an orangutan. He picks up the narwhal tooth and turns it in his hands, a habit you've noticed, the way other men handle pocket watches or worry beads. Great ape, orange-red fur, found in the forests of Borneo and Sumatra. Bontius described them in 1658. I've seen the sketches in 6 sources. A pause. I've never seen the actual animal. And Dr. Ashton has. Dr. Ashton saw a living one, briefly in Rotterdam, passing through on its way to the menagerie of William III. He says it looked at him. Sir Edmund sets the tooth back on its cushion. He says it looked at him the way a man looks at you when he doesn't understand your language but understands your tone, that you were paying attention to him and he was paying attention back. You think about that. He found it disturbing, Sir Edmund says. He's been thinking about it for 10 years. Dr. Ashton arrives at 10:30. He is nothing like Sir Edmund. Where Sir Edmund is round and settled and resembles prosperous grain, Dr. Ashton is thin and angular and perpetually in motion, his hands moving while he speaks, his eyes moving between objects and faces in the middle distance while he listens, never quite landing anywhere for long. He's perhaps 45, with a sharp jaw and grey at his temples, and the particular manner of a man who has spent so much of his time looking at things close up, that looking at things from a distance has become a skill he has to consciously apply. He stops in the doorway when he sees you. "This is my cataloguer," Sir Edmund says. "Thomas Crane, Norfolk, literate, systematic, doesn't faint." Dr. Ashton looks at you with those close examining eyes. You have the brief and uncomfortable sensation of being assessed for classification. "Have you catalogued the Siam hand?" "This morning, item 248. I proposed reclassifying from Chiroptera to Gibbon." He nods, already moving past you into the room, already in motion, already looking. His hands come out immediately. He touches things, not carelessly, but with the automatic assessment of someone for whom touch is as important a sense as sight. He pulls open the glass-fronted cabinet by the door, lifts a small object, examines it, replaces it. Gibbon, yes. Lesser apes, genus Hylobates. Though that nomenclature isn't established yet, don't put it in the catalogue, it'll be confused. Bontius described them from Siam and the Malay coast, smaller than the Borneo specimens. The hands are larger relative to body size in juveniles, which confused your previous cataloguer. He puts back whatever he was holding and turns to assess the room as a whole, the way you might assess a face, reading what it reveals and what it conceals. "You've been collecting a long time," he says to Sir Edmund. 40 years. 40 years. He's doing mental arithmetic. "Show me the Batavian crate." Opening the crate requires probit, a crowbar, and 20 minutes of work. The tar seal is fresher than the mermaid seal, thicker, newer, applied more recently. Probert applies the crowbar with the focused efficiency he brings to every physical task and doesn't comment on what's inside when the lid finally comes free, which tells you he looked before you all came in. The smell, when the lid lifts, fills the room immediately. Not unpleasant, not rotten, but dense in a way that competes with the room's existing density of smells. Something new, something not European, something from a forest you have never been in or seen, or smelled any trace of before this moment. Deep green and animal and wet, even though everything in the crate is completely dry. The smell of a living forest, concentrated and dried and packed in fern and sawdust and carried halfway around the world. Inside, the skeleton. You look at it and feel something happen in your chest that you don't entirely have words for. You've seen human skeletons. You've drawn human bones from the charts in the anatomy text Sir Edmund lets you borrow. You've handled the bones of animals. You know what bone looks like. Its specific white-yellow colour, the way it's heavy and yet somehow also suggests lightness, the way the structure of it is purposeful in every line. This skeleton is human-shaped, definitively, unmistakably, undeniably human-shaped. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with forward-facing eye sockets, and a rounded skull, and a jaw that hinges the way yours does. Hands with the thumb set apart from the fingers, exactly the engineering of your own hand. Feet with a structure for standing, but it is not human. The arms are too long. They reach to below the knee when you imagine them hanging by the skeleton's sides. The face is too projecting, the jaw thrusting forward, the orbital ridges of the eyes prominent in a way that changes the whole character of the skull. The rib cage is proportioned differently. The spine has a different curvature, human echo, something that walked in the same general form as a human and used the same general tools, hands, eyes, forward-facing attention, but in a body that followed a different blueprint. Man and not man simultaneously. Dr. Ashton makes a sound. It takes you a moment to identify it because it isn't words. It isn't even language. It's a single sustained note, barely audible, somewhere between an exhalation and a hum. The sound of a man encountering the thing he's been trying to reach for 10 years and finding it exactly where he was told it would be. He reaches into the crate. He places his hand, very gently, with the care of someone handling something significant, on the skull. His hand is trembling slightly. "It's real," he says, quietly. "Not to either of you in particular. It's absolutely real. You don't say anything." Sir Edmund doesn't say anything. He watches Dr. Ashton the way you've noticed he watches you when you're discovering something, from a slight distance, giving the experience room to unfold. "The drawings don't prepare you," Dr. Ashton says. "Bontius described them. Piso described them. Tentselius, I've read. Everything available." He lifts one of the skeletal hands from the crate, carefully supporting it, the way you'd lift something that matters, and holds it up in the candlelight. The fingers spread slightly, bones and joints, the same architecture as your hand but different, longer, denser. This creature held things with these hands, fed itself, made choices about what to eat, where to sleep, which branch to take across a gap. It used these hands for problems. He looks at both of you. This is not a monster, not a demon or a devil or a thing from travellers' tales told to frighten the credulous. This is an animal, a remarkable, extraordinary animal, and we know almost nothing real about it. He sets the hand back in the crate. He stands. He has the expression now of a man who has resolved something. "I need to bring fellows from the society to see this. Sloane, Hans Sloane, has been trying to get proper specimens from Borneo for years. He needs to see this before he wastes any more letters to the Dutch East India Company." After Dr. Ashton leaves, carrying 3 bones from the Batavian crate in a bag temporarily, for comparison at the Royal Society Library, Sir Edmund does something unexpected. He closes his own notebook, which he's been annotating throughout the morning's examination. He puts on his better coat. He picks up his walking stick, the one he uses for longer distances. "We're going out," he says. This is the first time he's taken you with him. Usually he sends Prober with errands, or sends you alone with a specific destination and a specific task. Going out together, walking through the city as collector and cataloguer, is new. "There's a dealer I need to see on a lane off Cheapside," he says, "and after that the docks. A Portuguese ship arrived from Lisbon 3 days ago, and my contact in Lisbon sent a letter saying the captain has something worth looking at in his hold." You pull on your coat, the cold of the street hits you like a flat palm against your face. November in London. The wet, seeping cold that is not the deep freeze of January but is in some ways worse. It finds every gap in your clothing within the first 3 minutes and then simply lives there, a constant companion for the rest of the day. This sky is the same pewter grey it was when you woke up, uniform and low, a sky that is doing the bare minimum of being a sky. Lime Street to Cheapside is about a 20-minute walk, and the route takes you through the commercial heart of the city, through Gracechurch Street where the morning market is still in full flow, past the looming bulk of the Royal Exchange on Cornhill, through the narrowing lanes that feed into Cheapside from the east. The traffic is, there's no better word for it, churning. The city at this hour is not moving through itself. It's colliding with itself. Carts delivering goods block other carts collecting goods, and behind the carts are the horses pulling sedan chairs and around, and between and through all of it are the people, vendors with their loads, apprentices on errands, journeymen moving between jobs, gentlemen who have apparently not yet learned that the quickest way to get anywhere in London is to stop trying to go in a straight line. You follow Sir Edmund, who moves through all of this with the ease of 40 years' practice. He knows which side of which street to take. He knows where the crossing sweepers keep the paths clean of the worst of the mud. He navigates by internal map, not looking at the vendors who shout at him, or the beggars who extend hands, not unkindly, just without engaging, and threads through the gaps in the human current with a sureness that you're still acquiring. A woman is selling eel pies from a basket, and the smell of them in the cold air is extraordinary, rich and savoury and hot, the steam rising from under the cloth covering the basket, and your stomach moves toward it before your feet do. You had bread and small beer for breakfast, standing in the kitchen while Probber gave you the morning summary. The eel pies smell like the direct opposite of that. But there's no time to stop. The dealer's premises are on a narrow lane off Cheapside that you could easily miss, would easily miss if you didn't know it was there. No shop sign, just a door, dark wood, brass knocker in the shape of a hand, and the smell that drifts from around the edges of the frame even in November, the smell you're coming to associate with everything related to Sir Edmund's work. Preservation spirits and dust and the specific organic sweetness of dried things. The dealer's name is Moreau. He is Swiss, in his 50s, with the compact efficiency of a man who has spent decades operating in a small space and has organised himself around that constraint. His shop is smaller than Sir Edmund's study and twice as packed, the organisation of it opaque to outside analysis. There appears to be no system, and yet Moreau knows precisely where everything is. He produces from under his counter a paper-wrapped parcel tied with string. Come from Lisbon 3 weeks past, he says. The captain who brought it didn't know what he had. Found it in a farmhouse he stayed at near the coast. Bought it for almost nothing. Sir Edmund unwraps it. A stone disc. Palm-sized, flat, smooth on the surfaces in the way that things get smooth when they've been handled for a very long time. A deep reddish brown that might once have been darker or lighter but has settled into this colour over whatever span of time. And on both faces, markings, not random, not geological, not the result of erosion or pressure. Deliberate marks, lines and spirals and symbols that cluster together in what looks like meaning, relating to each other, forming patterns that feel like they're part of a language even though you can't read them. Pre-Roman, Sir Edmund says without hesitation. I believe also, Moreau says, but from where? Sir Edmund turns it over, tilts it in the light. The Iberian Peninsula had several pre-Roman cultures, Tartessian, Lusitanian. He runs his thumb over the markings. These markings, the farmer found it digging foundations, Moreau says, near the coast. You open your mouth before you've decided to speak. It was found in soil. Both men look at you. I'm sorry, you say. If it was found in an excavation, the context matters. Was it in a particular layer? Were there other objects with it? Was it near anything structural? A wall? A floor? The soil it came from might tell you. You stop because Sir Edmund is looking at you with an expression you haven't seen before. How old are you? He says. 20. And where did you learn to think about the context of a find? From your library, you say. Lwyd, his Lithophalaceae Britannici Ichnographia. He argues that found objects can only be fully understood in relation to where they were found, that removing them from their context is like you search for the comparison, like reading one sentence from the middle of a book. Sir Edmund and Moreau exchange a glance. He's read Lwyd, Moreau says, in a tone that suggests he finds this marginally improbable. He reads everything I let him borrow, Sir Edmund says. Something in his voice that might be satisfaction. He turns back to the stone. Tell Captain De Silva, that's who brought it? De Silva, yes. Tell him that if he can get me any further information from the farmer about the site, what else was found there, what the soil was like, whether there are similar objects in the area, I'll pay considerably more than I'm paying today. He weighs the stone in his hand. I want not just the object, I want its story. He pays Moreau, wraps the stone and tucks it carefully into his coat. To the docks, he says. The docks are not what paintings suggest. They're not orderly. They don't have the composed quality of harbour views where ships sit reflected in glassy water, and everything is balanced and serene. The docks in 1693 are loud and wet and chaotic and smell like everything that's ever been transported from one part of the world to another, all at once. The smell reaches you before you reach the water. Salt and mud, the estuary smell, half sea and half river, and over it tar and hemp rope and timber and fish, and the sharper smell of horse manure from the animals working the loading cranes, and, underneath all of it, the particular warm, sour smell of physical labour, of men who have been moving heavy things since before dawn. The men on the wharf are in continuous motion, dozens of them working in relay from the ship, a three-masted merchant vessel riding low in the water, still heavy with cargo despite 3 days of unloading, to the warehouse at the wharf's edge. Each man knows exactly where he is in the chain. The crates and barrels and packages move with the efficiency of a system that doesn't need to think about itself. It's been running too long and been too thoroughly tested. There's almost no conversation, just the weight and the movement and the rhythm. 2 men pass you carrying between them a barrel that must weigh at least 200 pounds, moving at a near jog, their faces set with the expression of people for whom speaking would cost more than they can spare. Sir Edmund leads you along the wharf to the gangplank, where the first mate is waiting with the patience of a man who's been waiting his whole career. The hold of the ship. Down companionways that grow darker and narrower as you descend. The wood of the ship close on either side, the motion underfoot different from land. Not rolling. The ship is anchored, but a live quality. The slight creak of the hull, the sense of something floating rather than standing. The smell in the hold fills your lungs before the lantern shows you anything. Coffee, unmistakable, warm and roasted. The smell coming from sack stacked against the aft bulkhead. Something spiced under that. Cinnamon or pepper or both. The ghost of markets you'll never see. Bilge water, the universal undertone of all ships, and something else, something alive. You hear it before the lantern finds it, a sound, repeated, rhythmic, somewhere between a chirp and a lower call, patient, a sound that doesn't belong in a ship's hold, that carries within it something that feels like expectation. The first mate lifts his lantern. In the corner, in a wooden crate with gaps in the slats, is a bird. You have never seen a bird like this, roughly the size of a large crow in body, but the comparison ends immediately there. The feathers are green, not the dull olive green of English birds, but vivid, saturated green, pure enough that in the lantern light it seems to generate its own illumination. The tail feathers shade to red, deep and rich against the green. The beak is hooked and heavy, disproportionate to the head in a way that gives the face a quality of intent, concentration. And the eyes, bright, forward-facing, tracking the three of you with an intelligence that you recognize, that you can't help but recognize, as real. It makes the sound again, low, measured. It says words, the first mate says, a few at least. I don't know the language, but they're words. You look at Sir Edmund. Sir Edmund is looking at the bird with the expression you've now seen 3 times. On Dr. Ashton holding the orangutan skull, on this same face in the mirror when Sir Edmund thought you weren't watching during the mermaid examination. Wonder, direct, unguarded. The expression of a man 63 years old who has spent 40 years surrounding himself with extraordinary things and has somehow not exhausted his capacity to be amazed. Green parrot, he says, very quietly as though speaking at normal volume might alter something. South American, Brazil most likely, they appear occasionally in the Dutch trade. He watches the bird track his movement as he shifts slightly to the left. He's kept it alive in a hold for 3 weeks. The captain's boy, the first mate says. He's 12, the boy. Gave it fruit from the captain's table. Captain wasn't pleased, but the bird came through healthy, so. He shrugs the shrug of a man who has learned to assess outcomes rather than methods. Sir Edmund negotiates the purchase in the quiet voice he uses when he wants something very much and doesn't want that to show. You write it in the ledger standing in the lantern light, handwriting slightly uneven from the ship's motion under your feet. Item 250. Living specimen. Green parrot, probable origin Brazil, South America, species uncertain. Vivid green plumage, red tail feathers, large hooked bill, forward-facing eyes clear, apparent intelligence significant, behaviour calm, alert, tracking movement with attention. Acquired from Captain Antonio de Souza, vessel Estrela, arriving Lisbon from Brazilian coastal ports. Vocalizations includes what the vessel's mate describes as words, language unidentified. You pause, the quill hovering. Note, this specimen is alive. It has survived 3 weeks at sea in a hold. It requires research immediately into appropriate diet, housing, temperature range. It requires attention. It requires more than a catalogue entry. You close the ledger. Walking back through the streets of London with a parrot in a wooden crate draws a kind of attention that you are not prepared for. People stop. People point. Children abandon whatever they were doing and follow for a block or two before their attention is recaptured by something else. The parrot is quiet for the first 10 minutes, watching the city through the gaps in its crate, with the focused attention of an animal arriving somewhere new and taking a complete inventory. Then it speaks. 3 syllables. Clear. In a voice shaped like speech rather than bird sound. Sir Edmund stops walking. He turns to look at the crate. It's Portuguese, he says. That phrase. Or near enough. What does it say? He listens as the bird repeats it. His face does something complicated. Bom dia, padre, he says slowly. Good morning, priest. Or father. The word is the same. You both stand still in the middle of a Cheapside side street, people moving around you on both sides, while a green parrot from Brazil says good morning to a priest who is almost certainly dead. Sir Edmund sends you 2 mornings later to Gresham College. This is where the Royal Society holds its meetings, in rooms above the college in Bishopsgate Street. Dr. Ashton has arranged a brief meeting with a man named Hans Sloane, and you're going as Sir Edmund's representative, carrying the 3 bones from the Batavian crate in a leather bag, carrying a letter of introduction, carrying the ledger. You know the name Sloane from Sir Edmund's books. A Voyage to the Islands of Madeira, Barbados, Nevis, St. Christopher's, and Jamaica, published in 1687 with illustrations of plants and animals that you've spent several evenings working through, the precise engraved illustrations of species that don't exist in England, each one drawn with the systematic attention of a man who believes exact visual documentation is as important as verbal description. Sloane is 33, young for a Fellow of the Royal Society, already significant. He will one day bequeath his collection, 71,000 objects, to the British nation on the condition that it be kept together and made available to the public. That bequest will be the founding gift of the British Museum. But right now he's a young physician in a good coat who takes the 3 bones out of your bag, sets them on a plain deal table in a plain room, and looks at them with the same expression you've now seen in Sir Edmund's study twice. Pongo pygmaeus, he says. Is that established nomenclature? Attempted. He picks up the femur. The Dutch use orangutan. It comes from the Malay, man of the forest. He turns the bone, measuring it against his hand. I've seen a living one, in Rotterdam 5 years ago, passing through to a royal menagerie. It came off a Dutch East India Company ship. He says the next part simply, without drama. It was being kept in a very small cage. I went to examine it. The captain was charging people to look at it, a halfpenny a look. When I got close enough to see properly, it reached through the bars of the cage and touched my hand. He puts the bone down. Not grabbing, not aggression, just touching with one finger, the way you'd reach out to touch something you were uncertain about, testing whether I was real. He looks at you. I've been thinking about that touch for 5 years. You write it down, not in the catalogue, in your own notebook which you've started keeping, separate from the ledger. Sloane examines all 3 bones in roughly 20 minutes, dictating to his secretary, a young man even younger than you who writes with a speed that seems physically impossible, and at the end sits back. Tell Sir Edmund I want to see the complete skeleton. Proper examination, measurements, drawings. I'll bring draftsmen. He pauses. And tell him I'm also interested in his documentation. Provenance records, correspondence with dealers and ship captains, any information about where objects originated and who collected them and how they moved. Not just what the objects are, the journey of the objects. He looks at you with the level attention of someone constitutionally incapable of talking down to people. It matters, he says. Perhaps it doesn't seem to matter now, but in 100 years, 200 years, people will want to know more than what the thing is. They'll want to know where it came from, whose hands it passed through, what the exchange looked like, what it cost in every sense, and a pause. Some of those answers will be uncomfortable, a pause, but they'll be necessary. You sit with that for the whole walk, home, down Bishopsgate and through Cornhill and along the side streets, the city moving around you in its usual state of frantic self-absorption, nobody looking at you or caring where you're going, the journey of the objects, the cowstones in Wiltshire, the primate hand in Siam, the mermaids stitched in Nagasaki, the carved figure from the Gold Coast. You haven't got there yet in the catalogue, but you've looked at it on the shelf, and there was a note with it, and the note said things. Acquired following the pacification of the village. You'll get there. You'll write what's there. Sir Edmund takes you that evening to a coffee house on Exchange Alley. You've been to coffee houses before, alone, on free afternoons. The cheap ones on Cornhill where you can sit for an hour over a cup and read the Gazette and feel briefly like a person who is part of the public discourse of the city. At those places you are not remarkable, an apprentice or a journeyman, unremarkable in your wool coat, unremarkable in your face. The Minerva is not one of those places. It has a sign showing Athena helmeted with an owl on her shoulder, and the clientele visible through the steam-fogged window are dressed in a way that makes your coat feel like a statement about poverty. But inside, the basic physical format is familiar. Low ceiling darkened by years of tobacco smoke, wooden tables and benches, the universal coffee-house smell of the beverage itself, overlaid with the sweet thick smell of clay pipes. The difference is the conversations. Every cluster of men is having a variation of the same argument, whether such and such object is genuine or fraudulent, whether a specimen is what its seller claimed, whether someone's giant skull is a pathological ox cranium, and whether its owner knows this, or is simply hoping no one else notices. Sir Edmund is known here. Men acknowledge him as he passes. The nod of equals, the slight competitive assessment in the eyes of rivals, the genuine warmth of people who share a rare obsession. They sit at a table with 3 other men. You sit slightly back with your ledger, because Sir Edmund said, "Bring it," though you're not sure why yet. Thorsby collects botanical specimens and draws them himself, in sketchbooks that he produces from his coat pockets the way other men produce handkerchiefs. Habitually, naturally, the object already present when it's needed. He's seen a collection in Antwerp containing pressed American plants, undescribed species, plants that no European botanist has formally recorded. Graves collect geological specimens, minerals, crystals, the fossilized remains of creatures that no longer exist, or at least whose living versions are nowhere to be found. He produces from his coat a dark crystalline specimen the size of a child's fist. It responds to fire, he says, not combustion. The surface cracks in specific patterns, geometric, like scales forming. Everyone examines it. When it comes to your end of the table, you hold it under the candle. The crystal structure is fine-grained and directional. It grew one way, has a grain like wood, like it was organized by some process you don't have a framework to understand. Pellew, the instruments collector, clocks, telescopes, astrolabes, wants to know about a new Amsterdam clock movement using a different escapement design that keeps time to within 2 minutes a day. And the way he says 2 minutes conveys that he considers this a threshold achievement, a thing barely believed. They argue about value. A common stone, Sir Edmund says, that tells us something specific and real about how the earth formed is more significant than a ruby. But nobody will pay for the common stone, because nobody understands the significance, Graves says, because significance is invisible without context, and context is work. Sir Edmund glances briefly at you. People don't want to do the work. You write that down in the margin of the ledger. where Sir Edmund can see it if he reads it later and can ignore it if he prefers. He doesn't ignore it. On the walk home, past the shuttered shops and the lantern-lit tavern doorways and the link boys at their corners with their torches, you pass a shop window. In the window, in a rough glass case by candlelight, a hand. Not a preserved primate hand. A human hand, desiccated and curled, the fingers curved inward. A printed card beside it reads, "The hand of glory, protection from thieves, will burn for the owner and extinguish for enemies." You stop. Sir Edmund stops beside you. "A fake," he says, reading your expression. "Obviously," you look at it, though the hand itself might be real. It might. He examined it with a measuring gaze. The hand of glory is English folk magic. The hand of a hanged man, preserved, used as a candle holder. The candle supposedly sent everyone in a household into paralytic sleep, so a thief could work freely. It's old. Porter wrote about it in the 16th century. The belief predates Christianity in this country. So someone is selling in 1693 an object premised on folklore old enough to predate the church. And finding buyers. He turns away from the window. That tells you something. What does it tell you? He's quiet for a moment. That the desire for power over circumstances is very old, and that people will pay, in money or in belief, for anything that promises to give it to them. He starts walking. Collect the right things, and you're not collecting objects. You're collecting evidence of what people need. You file that away. In the margin of the ledger that night, before you go to bed, you write. The Wunderkammer is not a room full of objects. It is a room full of evidence. Evidence of the world's strangeness, of human desire, of power and its distribution. The objects are not the point. The questions the objects raise are the point. The moral crisis comes in July. It arrives the way crises usually arrive. Not with a trumpet, but with a small uncomfortable sensation that grows slowly over several hours of work into something you can't find a comfortable position around. You're cataloguing the Upper East Shelf, the section Sir Edmund calls ethnographic materials, which is his term for objects made by human hands. Not European hands, but hands from elsewhere, from the parts of the world that appear on maps as destinations rather than places. Many of them are beautiful. Many of them are clearly sacred. You know they're sacred not because of any religious training. You're not especially devout and have a vague Church of England upbringing that did not include a thorough education in the visual language of other traditions. You know because you can feel the purposefulness in them, the intentionality. These are objects made for a reason that extends beyond decoration or utility, made to mean something in a context that involved belief, community, ceremony, and the notes that come with many of them say things, taken from a shrine, acquired from a priest who needed money, acquired following the pacification of the village. You hold a carved wooden figure, approximately 14 inches tall, West African in origin, feather decoration still partially intact. You hold it for a long time. It's beautifully made, with a specific economy of form. The shapes are not representational in a European sense, not attempting to show you a face that looks like a face or a body in natural proportion. They're organizing information differently, saying something in a visual language you don't fully understand but can feel the coherence of, the way you can feel the coherence of a sentence in a language you don't speak but can hear is language. Someone made this for a shrine. The note says the shrine was destroyed. The note calls it clearing operations. You write the catalogue entry. You write it factually, as you always do. The dimensions, the material, the condition, the provenance as known. And then, in the margin, in the small clear handwriting you've developed over months, you write, "This object was not sold. It was not exchanged. It was removed from a place of significance during an act of violence. Its presence in this collection is a consequence of that violence. The distinction between acquired and taken matters. This should be documented. You don't know if Sir Edmund will read this. You leave it there." That evening, reviewing the day's entries over supper, his habit, the ledger open beside his plate, Sir Edmund reaches that entry. He reads the main entry. He reads the marginal note. He's quiet for a long moment. Then he says, "Continue." You nod. You continue. The elevated perspective, when it comes, is not a hill. It's Pellieu's telescope. He invites you and Sir Edmund both, to his house in Cripplegate on a clear August night. Pellieu has a roof garden, a platform above his top story accessed by a ladder surrounded by low, parapet walls open to the sky. He's arranged it specifically for the telescope. The telescope is mounted on a heavy wooden stand, brass tube 4 feet long, lenses ground in the Dutch Republic by a craftsman Pellieu has corresponded with for years. It's aimed at the moon. You look through it. You've looked at the moon your entire life. You know what it looks like. You grew up in Norfolk, where the skies are flat and enormous and unobstructed by buildings, and the moon on winter nights can light up a field well enough to work in. You know the moon's light on water, on frost, on the fog that sits in the low fields in autumn. You do not know what you're looking at now. The moon through Pellieu's telescope is not a light. It is a place. Mountains. Actual mountains, their shadows cast long and dark across the surface. The shadows proving height, proving terrain, proving geography. Flat regions. Pellieu calls them mare, seas, though there is no water in them, just ancient dark plains. And circular scars, dozens of them, the wounds of impacts, objects that struck this surface with enough force to carve those rings into the rock. The moon has a history of violence. The moon has geography, like England has geography. You stand at the eyepiece for longer than is probably socially acceptable. Below you and around you, London is continuing. The sounds of the August evening rise up. Tavern noise, the distant ringing of a church bell, a horse on cobblestones, the general murmur of 500,000 lives being conducted within shouting distance of each other. The city smell rises too. Coal smoke and tanneries and river mud and the summer reek that gets into everything in August. Through the telescope, none of that is relevant. You're somewhere else. You're on the surface of a rock 40 miles across that has been there exactly like this, for longer than any human mind has the architecture to truly comprehend, longer than the species that built this telescope, longer than the planet the telescope is standing on. It's just a rock, you say, and you're aware this isn't sophisticated, but you need to say it. Yes, Pellieu says, leaning against the parapet, an enormous rock, floating. Yes, and we're also a rock. Yes. You pull yourself back from the eyepiece. London reopens around you. The smell and sound of it. You think about the collection. All those objects gathered from all those places and carried here by ships and traders and accident and violence. Brazil, Japan, Borneo, Portugal, West Africa. All places on a rock floating in a void, all visible from the moon as a single small point of light. From up there, all of Sir Edmund's cabinet, all the narwhal teeth and preserved hands and fake mermaids and pre-Roman disc stones, fits inside a speck. From down here, it contains the world. The telescope, you say slowly, is a kind of cabinet of curiosities. Pellew looks at you. It brings the unreachable close enough to examine. It makes the world bigger and smaller at the same time. It says, there is more than any single life can see, and here is a mechanism for seeing a little more of it. Pellew is quiet for a moment. Yes, he says, that's exactly what it is. The confession comes in September. A quiet evening, the end of a full day, 3 new items catalogued, a letter drafted for a dealer in Rotterdam, the orangutan skeleton measured and documented at last, with Sloane's draftsmen taking up half the study for most of the afternoon. You're at your desk, writing. Sir Edmund is at his writing. The parrot is in the kitchen, having informed Probber twice already this evening of the hour in Portuguese. Sir Edmund puts down his pen. Why do you think people collect? He says. Without preamble, you put down your pen. You've had 40 years, you say. Why ask me? Because I've been reading your marginal notes for 7 months. He turns his chair to face you. I want to know what someone with 7 months of this arrives at, you think. People collect, you say, because the world is larger than any one life. Because you can't go everywhere or meet everyone or see everything. So you find objects, things that travelled, made by hands you'll never meet, and you bring them together and try to see the connections. The benign version, Sir Edmund says. Yes, the less benign version, people collect because having a thing means having power over it. Having it means controlling its story, even if the story wasn't yours to control. He's quiet for a moment. Do you think I'm that kind of collector? I think both impulses operate in the same room, you say. In 1693, in this city, with the money available and the ships bringing things, the two things can't be fully separated. He nods, slowly. When I started, he says, I was 22, made enough money in the wool trade to have some left over, and a ship captain sold me a shark's tooth for a shilling. Said it was a sea serpent's tooth. It was obviously a shark's tooth. I knew it then, but I bought it. He glances toward his desk, toward the shark's tooth, item 7 in the catalogue, the beginning of everything. I thought, this tooth was in a living animal in an ocean I've never seen, and now it's here, on my desk, in London. I felt the size of the world in that tooth, the distance from wherever that shark lived to wherever I was sitting, and I wanted to feel it again. He looks at you. That's not entirely benign, is it? Wanting to possess the world. No, you say. But it's not entirely wrong either. He nods. What I want, what I've always wanted, what I couldn't have articulated when I bought that shark's tooth but understand now, is for there to be a place where anyone can come and feel that. Not wealthy men at private viewings, not fellows of learned societies. He spreads his hands in the gesture you know. Anyone who wants to feel the size of the world in a shark's tooth. Anyone who wants to hold a stone from inside a cow and think, this stone was somewhere before it was here, and so was the cow, and so was I, and the world is stranger than I was told. That would require more than one room, you say. Yes. More than one collection. Yes. And a commitment to writing, honestly, where things came from, how they got here. You pause. What that means. Sir Edmund looks at you for a long moment. The marginal notes, he says. Yes. Keep writing them. By October, the city has changed its smell. The summer reek has gone out of it. The worst of the tanneries and the overworked Thames, the baking mud of low tide in August that you can taste at the back of your throat in the right wind. October in London smells like smoke and cold stone, and the last of the leaves from the few trees the city hasn't displaced, and underneath it all, the river in its autumn mode. colder, sharper, less forgiving. You've been here almost a year. One evening you walk down to the river alone, not for any errand, not with any destination, just to walk along the bank in the early dark and look at the Thames. The water at evening in autumn has a particular quality, pewter and silver, the sky not fully dark yet and the reflection not fully light, everything hovering in between states. Watermen call to each other across the water. Lamps begin to appear in the windows of the houses along the bank. You stand at the wall and look at it. You came to London 6 months before you came to Sir Edmund's door. 16 months in the city now, and the city has gotten into you in the way it gets into everyone who stays long enough. Not as a set of facts about streets and distances, but as a rhythm, a way of moving through crowds, a set of smells that no longer register as remarkable, a comfort in the noise that would have baffled the person who stepped off the carrier's cart from Norwich. 16 months, and you've catalogued 473 objects. You've written marginal notes on roughly 60 of them. Notes about provenance, about context, about the uncomfortable intersection of wonder and acquisition and violence. Sir Edmund has read all of them. He has not objected to any of them. In the cold air by the river, you think about all the objects in that room, about where they came from and what it cost for them to get here, and what they mean and what they don't mean, and whether meaning is a thing that objects contain or a thing that people bring to objects. You think about the parrot saying good morning to a dead priest. You think about the cowstones, their iridescence that shifts in candlelight. You think about the stitching on the mermaid, the careful, patient stitching of someone who understood perfectly well what they were making and made it well regardless. The world is full of objects that have outlasted the people who made them. The world is full of hands. Every object in the collection passed through hands. Many hands. The hands that made it, these hands that used it for its original purpose. The hands of the people who took it or sold it or carried it to a ship. The hands of the captain who transported it. The dealer who sold it. Sir Edmund who bought it. Your hands. You have held all of those things in these hands. You felt their weight and their temperature and their texture. The cold of the stones and the smooth worn surface of objects that have been touched by many people. The roughness of the dried specimens. The unexpected weight of dense minerals. Every time you've held something, you've added your hands to its history. The attic room is dark. Your candle on the windowsill throws a small warm globe of light on the sloping ceiling, and outside the single window the October sky is clear enough to show stars. The coal smoke thinned tonight by the cold, the stars present in the dark between chimney pots. You sit on the edge of the bed. The straw mattress makes its familiar sound under your weight. You don't notice it. Any more, the same way you don't notice the smell of the study after the first minute of each morning. The city noise comes up through the floors and the walls in its evening register. Lower, more dispersed, the daytime roar resolved into the nighttime murmur. A cart on the cobbles. 2 floors below, the parrot making its settling into sleep sound. Not words, just the small rhythmic noise of a living creature finding its position in the dark. You lie back, pull the blanket up, thicker than the summer blanket, exchanged 2 weeks ago when the nights got cold enough that you were waking at 3 with your feet icy. The shadows of the chimneys cross the ceiling as the candle flame moves in the draught from the window's loose edge. You think about the collection, about the room below you, dark now, the objects waiting in whatever way objects wait. The crocodile on the ceiling, The skeleton in its hat in the corner, the narwhal tooth on its cushion, the mermaid in its box with the lid off, the parrot in the kitchen saying bom dia to whoever comes in the morning. All of them here, in this house, in this city. You think about the 7 notebooks with their 7 incompatible systems of organisation, about the single new ledger, now 3/4 full, with catalogue entries and marginal notes, the 2 things interleaved, the thing described and the questions the thing raises. You think about what Sloane said, the journey of the objects, and what you've written in the margins about the objects that didn't arrive by trade, about the ones that came by violence, by the logic of empire that says the things you value may be taken because you have the power to take them. You haven't resolved that. You don't think you can resolve it at 20 years old in 1693 in an attic room in Lime Street, but you've written it down. That has to count for something. Tomorrow there will be more cataloguing, more items on more shelves, more objects with more stories told and half told and not told at all, more margins to fill with questions. But that's tomorrow. Right now the city is settling. The candle burns, the parrot is asleep. Somewhere in the city, in coffee houses and counting houses and the meeting rooms of learned societies, people are still arguing about what the world is made of and how you go about knowing it. Whether a narwhal tooth is a unicorn horn or a natural object. Whether an orangutan that touches your hand is a person or an animal, or something that doesn't fit in either category yet. Whether the objects in the collection are evidence of the world's wonder, or evidence of the world's cruelties, or, most likely, most honestly, both at once. The light from the candle is very warm. The ceiling is very close, as ceilings in attics always are. You're warm enough, tired enough, safe enough. You have a ledger with your handwriting in it, and 473 catalogue entries, and 60-odd marginal notes, and the beginning of an understanding of something you don't yet fully have the language for, something about the relationship between the objects people keep and the people who keep them, and what gets lost and what gets preserved and what the difference is between those 2 things. That exists. You made that. The ink stains on your fingers won't come out no matter how much you scrub them. You've stopped trying. The candle gutters. The warm amber light pulls back from the corners of the room and gathers itself around the wick, smaller and smaller, and then goes out. Darkness fills the room. The good darkness of a cold, clear night, not total. The faint light of stars through the window, the very distant suggestion of the city's own candlelight reflected from low cloud at the edges of the sky. Somewhere in the city, a church bell marks the hour. You don't count the strokes. Your hands are still, the ink-stained hands that have held things from everywhere today, that have held the weight of the world's strangeness in their palms, object by object, and set each thing down carefully and written about it carefully, and thought about it carefully and started again. Let it come. Let sleep take you the way it takes everyone after a day that used them fully. Let the objects rest on their shelves. Let the parrot dream of a forest it was born in. Let the collection be still, all 473 items, the real and the fraudulent and the ambiguous and the beautiful and the uncomfortable, all of them carrying their histories quietly in the dark. Let the city be just sound, not a problem to solve or a machine to understand, just sound. Water and bells and the slow creak of a house settling into the cold. You've earned this. All of it. Every page, every margin, every object held until it was warm. Take it. Centuries will pass. The room will change. The house on Lime Street will be something else entirely. The The city will grow in directions that would make no sense to anyone living in it in 1693. The ships on the river will give way to things that don't need wind. The streets will be lit by something other than candles and torches. The coal smoke will thin, eventually, though not quickly, not without cost. But the impulse will remain. The impulse to collect, to bring the world's strangeness into one room and say, look at this. Look at how large the world is and how various and how strange. Look at what human hands have made and what nature has made, and how you can't always tell the difference and how the question of the difference matters. Someone will sit in 100 years in a building in London looking at a glass case containing a narwhal tooth. The tag will say what it is, correctly this time, because someone will have come along by then with better taxonomy and better honesty and better light to see by. They will feel the world in that tooth, the distance from the Arctic Ocean to wherever they're standing, the same thing you felt the first time you held it. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, that doesn't change either. So rest. Rest the way Thomas Crane rested in his attic in Lime Street in October of 1693, after almost a year of cataloguing the world into a single leather ledger. Let the questions soften and slow. Let your thoughts do what thoughts do at the edge of sleep. Become less urgent, less precise. Drift away from the specific objects and the specific questions towards something warmer and less defined. You are here. You held these things. You wrote them down. That's enough. That's more than enough. Let the world go. Let the darkness have you. Good night.